for example, at -40, which is what the German army experienced in World War II in the Moscow campaign, at -40, if you do not protect, if you expose your eyes, this part of your head too long, your eyelids will freeze. And then you lose your eyesight because you can't close your eyes. And they had lots of German soldiers go blind because their eyelids froze.
Our appearance plays a huge role in our overall satisfaction with life. Unfortunately, tons of anti-aging companies take advantage of that. Many of the products these companies promote fall short, simply because they don't get to the root of the problem. For example, using temporary solutions to cover wrinkles, luckily, there's an alternative that has worked for me. It's called Health with Adapt 2030. This multi-collagen at its core is made up of 5 key types of collagen. This ensures that you're getting key nutrients your body needs to keep you looking and feeling young. No taste, no clumping, unlike other collagen supplements. This is why I recommend Health with Adapt2030.com Ageless Multi-Collagen, a quick way for youthful appearance. Use the link in the description box below for 51% off my favorite Ageless Multi-Collagen. And now on with the video.
Hello, this is Jeff Nyquist, and with me is David Dubine. Hi, David. How are you doing tonight?
Yeah, doing well. It's good that we're having a second chance to talk on what originally we had both talked about politically, temperatures, weather patterns, food price rises, and it all seems to be hitting exactly what we talked about in the prior interview. Okay, they're already pre-planning in that they're going to need to have movable power everywhere to still have some semblance of society, knowing that what we consider traditional infrastructure might have to shift drastically in the way you deliver power or goods to cities if the above ground conduits aren't working. What's your plan B and then plan C?
Now, Russia has a lot of other non-nuclear icebreakers, but looking here on this thing, it looks like they have 11 nuclear ones right now. And these Arctica, these new ones, there's 6 of the 11. So they've basically doubled their icebreaker fleet in recent years. Interesting. So it's and then they give all their names: the Lenin, the Arctica, the Sibir, the Rossiya, the Semverpa. They've got all the names here, and they're saying what their status is. But it's very, it's something that we don't really hear a lot about. And of course, going back to the Electroverse, let's go on to this next one.
Can I ask you one question before we go? Sure. The names of all those ships, which one for you, knowing Russia, Russian culture, strategy, etc., which one of those names was the most interesting or jumped out from you? The Lenin, or was it
the Lenin?
The Lenin, okay.
Yeah, the Lenin, that's pretty interesting. Of course, the Lenin, that is an old one, and it's a museum ship now. So the Lenin is actually a museum ship. But of course, because they don't want to give those names now to
slowly tugs along to bring power to places. It'll get there soon.
Yeah, they'll be there soon. But it's and now going back to Electroverse, this is really kind of illustrates record cold grip Siberia, -68.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Northern Hemisphere snow mass marches on. Canada sees lowest November temperature since 2004. So any commentary on -68.3 degrees in Siberia? This is December 2nd here, 2021.
Right, and those are degrees below zero.
Below zero
67
Fahrenheit.
degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. Because a lot of times, the way that the mind works, you have to put that below 0 to get it to really register. Whoa.
And those who like the Arctic explorers, if you read about Admiral Byrd spending the winter in the South Pole, if you read about these other expeditions, -40, -50, these are killer temperatures, right? -68, imagine. That is so cold that if you expose your skin to it for more than a couple minutes, your skin will literally freeze. I mean, it is that is unbelievably cold.
Yeah, you had flash frozen food temperatures are what? above that 100 Celsius below
Yeah.
zero for the flat or
Yeah.
for the, you consider how do you freeze food that you would buy somewhere that's in a bag provided for you. They froze that. Flash freezing is that around that temperature for what you consider vegetables and things you would buy from Bird's Eye. I'm not promoting, I'm just saying, I'm just remember the name.
If you, for example, at -40, which is what the German army experienced in World War II in the Moscow campaign, at -40, if you do not protect, if you expose your eyes, this part of your head too long, your eyelids will freeze. And then you lose your eyesight because you can't close your eyes. And they had lots of German soldiers go blind because their eyelids froze. That's what -40 will do if you can't get some kind of protection. Wear goggles, have something that keeps the heat in somehow.
Yeah, go 25 degrees colder than that.
Right, 25 degrees colder. Just imagine. I mean, they had people. I mean, it was very famous. They issued the German army was not adequately. They did not have adequate cold weather gear in 1941 in December. So December 5th, the temperatures just dropped all of a sudden to this. This Arctic cold front just came in out of nowhere, and you could freeze to death defecating. Men literally trying to go to the bathroom would freeze to death before they could finish going to the bathroom. That's how cold -40, -68. Imagine that. You better be wearing a diaper. Maybe a spacesuit.
Yeah, I want to come back. In fact, the thing about the food in the cold too. When Shackleton was stuck in the ice and they was finally rescued, and the crew was finally rescued, whoever survived through that. The account is that when they finally got him back to an open water port, when they first came in, they all jumped out of the boats and started clubbing all the elephant seals that were just the random ones that were laying there and used to the people, but they were so hungry. And so, meals came by so infrequently. And they called them madmen at the end of it because they just ran around and clubbed 20, 30 elephant seals right on the beach there to get it because they were so used to jumping on whatever they could. So there's food on the boats, go get the food. There's food, go faster.
You just imagine you're living on the ice. You're trying to find penguins to eat. You are living on an ice floe basically, and your greatest moment of hunting was you found what was it, a snow leopard or whatever that they shot. It's one of these giant, it's related to a seal. And that's what you're eating. And they even had killer whales coming up underneath their encampment, breaking up into their encampment, trying to find them for food, But there's a book called The Incredible Journey of Sir Ernest Shackleton, which I recommend. I mean, I read it as a kid twice. I liked it so much. But it was truly an incredible journey. But how they got rescued is they had a longboat from the ship, and they decided to dare the weather, and they tried to sail that longboat from the Antarctic Sea area up to South Georgia Island, a whaling station. And they almost didn't make it, but this party made it and said, "Come down and save our friends here." But not one man died of that expedition. They all lived. Nobody
I
died.
wasn't aware of that. That's a good factoid.
That is what's incredible. Shackleton was famous as an Arctic explorer. He did not want to lose any lives. And I think he died of a heart attack like a couple of years later. He was getting ready to do another expedition, and he had a massive coronary and died. But a fascinating story. And of course, they had been missing for almost 2 years at that point. And when he walked into this whaling station and they saw him, and of course, they were in terrible shape, these guys. They were like in shock. Oh my God, Shackleton, look at you. Where did you come from? You're lost. You're gone. You go down into the Antarctic and they don't see you for 2 years. You're assumed dead.
Oh, absolutely. Even in modern day, are you kidding me? Today? The search is called off. We couldn't find them, and then you found your way into an ice cave and then pop out because you were eating algae out of the ice or something, right?
Right. Yeah, it's an incredible story. But here we're seeing these incredible temperatures. These are, when you read Admiral Byrd's book, I don't remember him recording a -68 that winter he spent, the first human being to spend a winter in Antarctica. I don't remember that. I mean, I have to go back. Maybe he did, but I don't think so. And didn't we get a record temperature in Antarctica recently? I thought I read -78. Wasn't that the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth?
It was touching that. I think the coldest is 82 below zero or 81 below zero dot something. But the reason that that was such a thing is, yeah, down at that time of the year, again, it was an out of season thing. It was in the wrong month for that extreme cold to happen. But you know, the reason that it came to a lot of attention was that was literally within a degree or so of the coldest temperature ever recorded on the entire planet in the warmest year ever, going into spring in the warmest year ever. So that didn't sink too well over there, did
Well,
it? That was
well,
last year, by the way. That was in the
last year,
year
yeah.
2020.
That, and you know, this record grips temperature grip Siberia. They got a quote from two you know, scientists. One, Dr. Fred Seitz, said, "I have never before witnessed a more disturbing corruption of the peer review process than the events that led to this IPCC report." And Dr. Tom Sagelstad says the IPCC global warming model is not supported by the scientific data.
How many times, again, you know, that kind of brings us full circle. How many times have their predictions fallen off? And then why is the global temperature down under 1/10 of a degree, under that mark, 0.00 or 0.08 against the 30-year baseline average? And they're trying to sell you all these carbon taxes, the Great Reset, and everything that's structured to move your life is based on humans are committing and emitting too much carbon, committing too many offenses by buying things. Oh, but the advertisements tell you buy two. The same corporations say buy three. Two are on sale. Are the same ones that are out there going, oh, there's too much CO2. And how many times can you see the predictions fall through before? I guess never, because so many people are still on the bandwagon of believing. But you need to be a little bit older to understand the changed predictions, and especially that 1.5 C now. We got to keep carbon dioxide below 1.5 C, because you got to realize even when it terminates at its point, it'll still last 1,000 years in the atmosphere. Methane will come banging out of there about 7 years after, 7 to 10 years. You know, once it reaches that point, like that methane actually disappears and dissipates.
We're not living in a time where the largest amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, are we?
No, you'd have to go back. I mean, how long do you want to talk about further into the past? So
let's go 20,000 years. What was it like then?
150 years, but why don't we go back 10 million years, 100 million years, 30,000 years, 12,000 years at the Younger Dryas, when whatever impact event happened, the Earth's temperature dropped 15 degrees Celsius in a matter of a year, or maybe even months, but then it rebounded out as quickly. The Earth's temperature, for those of you who want to check, rose 15 degrees Celsius in 3 years. Now that was at the end of the Younger Dryas, circa 12,000 years ago. Now the conjecture is a comet or a fragment of a comet came in and hit the Laurentide ice sheet over Canada, hit it, exploded. So imagine a comet hitting an ice sheet during the coming out of the ice age. What would happen? Huge amount of steam. The Carolina bays, which have all these indentations, supposedly where it hit and where those giant ice fragments rolled up through the atmosphere, 40, 50 miles. And when they came down as tonnage, as pieces of ice smashed into there, that's why they can find no impactors. But all those Carolina bays created with the same trajectory as the ice came over, of course, it's going to have a pattern going out wherever the shock wave would move forward, and they're all facing the same direction, so they can kind of even triangulate now where it hit, what angle it hit at, and then where did all the debris fly out and create these patterns across the planet that are supposedly unexplainable.
And the debris can also blot out the sunlight, can prevent the sunlight from heating the Earth, so it contributes to this effect, as well as the heat from the blast melting ice and melting ocean and whatever, and creating clouds, more water vapor, which also is going to cool the Earth.
Yeah, not to mention the cold water that would have spilled into the oceans that had an equalized warm temperature. Because imagine if a quarter of an entire ice sheet on a continent melts in the same one day, and it's flowing in 1,000, 2,000 foot floods toward the ocean, sculpting in a lot of places in Washington State and Oregon. Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock have done an enormous amount of work on this, where the floods had actually terminated out. And these floods, were 2,000, 3,000 feet deep. But how much cold water would have gone into the ocean and then upset everything. Because
Yes,
you have to think
that's
about,
true.
in an ice age, and so many people don't understand that when the ice age climate locks in, it locks in for 60,000 years of the exact same plant and harvest dates. The oceans would have stabilized temperature. Everything would have locked in. Like we know in at least our interglacial period here, there's a planting and a harvesting date because our weather's was stable enough for us to plan that.
Yeah.
Well, it's gone out of sync now. That's why we're having problems with food production globally. But if you had a full-on ice age that had locked in and they had stable growing for, let's say, even 20,000 years, 30,000 years, what kind of societies could have arisen about that? But how quickly would it terminate when you disrupted that entire system with water flows that are, these things are so unimaginable for us to comprehend on the size of it, on the planetary scale of it. But there was an impact event that did things so many orders of magnitude. So when they look back in history, and I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm going to ramble for a second here.
Yeah.
That Younger Dryas period is always the cutoff point when they show you these temperature maps and all these things. They always leave that point out of there. They always start the temperature 8,000 years ago, 9,000, but they never go back to 13,000 years ago and show you that gigantic drop and the gigantic rise. And then and they keep telling you, of all time, it's never been. Well, wait a second, just go back 12,000 years. And yes, it has been, but like orders of magnitude more than it is today. So this whole warmest ever, I don't know, again, what are the time frames they're talking? The last interglacial, that was warmer than now. And that was 118,000 years ago. It was a degree Celsius average global temperature warmer than now. So their whole, it's the warmest ever in the last how many, millions of years. Yeah, blah. Go out and do some
we go back 1,000 years and it was warmer than it is now.
Yeah, that's true.
The medieval warming period, you had,
how did Europe
they were growing crops.
The question.
They were growing crops in Greenland, which they can't grow now because the ground is frozen year round in Greenland. And they called it Greenland for a reason, because it was green then. So, and people go, how could they call it Greenland? It's all just white. It's all permanently frozen all year round. It wasn't then. When the Vikings first came to Greenland, they did farming. Well, nobody can farm in Greenland now. And they wanted, that was that whole scandal. That whole, they got rid of the hockey stick. They got rid of the, that warming period in their data. They just took it. Right. They took it right out of the data. That's gaslighting everybody. This is science now, ladies and gentlemen, where you actually falsify your data. Is this getting more familiar now? We're seeing this all the time. It's like science is, we say it's science, but you're lying. Those aren't the numbers. Here we have this next article here. Low temperature records continue to fall across Europe. Australia's New South Wales suffers coldest November on record. And this is December 1st, 2021.
Chapters of history are written by how cold it is or how much food you can grow or not. And that is the last 10,000 years of Earth's recorded history. And what we know civilization is determined by how much food you can grow, period. And when you start to see all these signs lining up from both hemispheres now, that below normal temperatures are there, I think the southern hemisphere is leading this grand solar minimum by one season, and then like what they just experienced down there, we'll experience here, and vice versa. There'll be one season ahead as it goes into winter next year. But just look at the rise and fall of civilizations, even over the last 4,000 years. Well, why did they get to this apex point and then they crash with the highest science, mathematics, etc., and then boom, they're down again? So it has to be something that triggers that event, and it's always the lack of food that can be produced. So we're just looking at chapters history driven by the sun.
Yeah, and of course we have unprecedented numbers of people on the world. If we go back through written history, we're talking about 2,500 years of written history going back to Herodotus, in which, the population of the world was probably a couple 100 to 300 million people total. You get to about 200 years ago, you got about 1 billion people maybe. So now all of a sudden, in the last 50 years, we go from about 3 billion people, 2.5 to 3 billion people. Already we're almost at 8 billion people in the world at this time. And that is astonishing. So if we've doubled the world population in the last 35 years, nearly 8 billion, last 40 years, we're suddenly we've been able to feed those people because it's warmer on the planet. And because it's warmer on the planet, but now it's getting colder, what's going to happen? And we see the effects on food growing, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But here we have this article, record lows grip Europe. Sweden registers minus 37.4 degrees centigrade. That's 35.3 degrees Fahrenheit. UK schools forced to shut, bigger freeze inbound. And this is November 30th, just a few days ago now. And there's a clear-cut solar climate coupling and very strong natural variability of climate on all historical timescales. I can hardly believe anymore that there's any relevant relationship between human CO2 emissions and climate change. This is from, I don't know how to say his name. His name is Smith, Heyo Smith. But this is very, very interesting. And with these negative 35.3 degrees Sweden.
Yeah, how do you explain that? That's some of the coldest temperatures they've ever had. And this November was the coldest November they've ever had.
Brutal Arctic air.
Negative 37, that broke all their temperature records. Even in the month of December, you're looking at the onset of the cold events, and you can trace that month by month on what the coldest month is, obviously January, February. But they're getting those temperatures now, which is so, everything seems to be getting cooler months in advance. And then last year we lost our wine vines because we just planted them, and then it got so cold later in the spring after planting that everything was frozen. So the cold's onsetting earlier, and it's having strange freeze events further into the spring after people plant. And this is the exact same thing talked through history. The loss of crops coming into harvest season, and then into the spring, the planting season was delayed by months, plural, and they didn't have the machines back then that we do.
And here we were talking about sea ice. Here's another item. Arctic sea ice extent currently second highest in 15 years and growing.
Wow. That's how did that ever happen? IPCC. Does anybody ever want to correct it? All those news headlines that you say, some of them are being memory hold. The good ones, like the Arctic temperatures you mentioned, you couldn't find it. You had to go in the Wayback Machine and look for it. But where are these retractions or additions to? Okay, the sea ice, I had a chance to look through the 2021 IPCC report for policymakers, and that's a real easy one to read. They're not going to give you the full 300-page thing. But in there, it's 20 pages, 20 plus pages, and one of the sea ice graphs were in there, and they were off on the miss on last year and this year, but the projections were so far getting low that the actual sea ice amount was literally from here to my microphone on their chart, and there was no retraction or addendum to say, well, sea ice has been accumulating and growing over the last years. In Greenland, another anomaly, how much record ice is on Greenland up there, because on the electroverse chart you can jump over to the DMI, which is the Danish Meteorological Institute, and then you can check out the Greenland ice daily, which is either gains or losses, accumulated balance. There's a whole bunch of different variants in there to see what the ice is doing on Greenland. Well, they had an event last year that took it two orders of scale off the chart, 13 gigatons for a single day gain, and they have their chart pegged at 10. So they'd have to put a whole nother thing, and then that blue line would stick up in last year, so it wouldn't make sense. Like, wait, we're supposed to be losing ice, and if you look at the overall gains on Greenland, they continue to rebound and have extreme anomalies with these massive gains. If you look at the sea ice or the Greenland ice chart from last year, there were two massive events that were so far out that they literally need to redo the chart to add two new bands in at the top there so it can fit from last year's gains.
What I've noticed is that through all this is when I go to look, I know something, I've seen something go by about colder weather, and I go back to find it, and I can't find it with a Google search. It's like the search engines, and then all I can find about it is how it's getting warmer and how these idiots these climate deniers are all wrong. And it's like, why is there a conspiracy to make us believe it's getting warmer when it's actually getting colder? What's that about? We've got a story here. Rare heavy November snow traps Brits in pub. I guess they might like that, right? To get trapped in a pub for third night as Arctic blast engulfs Europe. Yeah, that's where to get stuck if you're going to be stuck.
Oh, the keg's dry. No.
And they quote Professor Fritz Verenholt, quote, "It's now obvious that the IPCC models are not correctly reflecting the development of atmospheric temperatures." Of course, they're trapped in a pub for 3 days by snow in the UK. When does that happen?
15-foot snow drifts too. Don't forget that part.
They were. I saw that they had the picture there. If the readers go and find that story, there it is. This is the pub. Is just the whole building's covered in snow.
And did you see the blizzard warning for Hawaii as well?
No, there's a blizzard warning for Hawaii.
Yeah, Big Island. The Big Island.
Don't
worry about it. Don't ask any questions.
They've got
No, I'm totally serious today. If you look,
yes,
there's a blizzard warning for Hawaii today on December 3rd.
And then, of course, in Scotland, Nordic power prices surge on sub-zero temps and low winds. Danger to life warning issued in Scotland, plus no hurricanes for the first time in 65 years. This is from November 26th.
Well, you're looking at a changing ocean, which also drives a lot of different weather patterns that are hitting Europe, coming off of those isles first. So when you look back in history, you start to see when there's different circulation changes in the ocean, the upwelling, the sinking of the cooler waters. If that gets disturbed at all, well, then that warm water patch that's there that keeps the UK would probably be about the same temperature as Moscow. I think I've heard this reference before. London would be about the same temperature as Moscow if that ocean current didn't circulate up there to allow different weather patterns and a warming ocean to keep that climate, substantial.
Yeah, I know that if Moscow was in the Western Hemisphere here in North America, it would be on Hudson's Bay. That's how far north it is. I know that Europe is further north than most of North America, but it's got, as you say, the warming current. I have a friend in Sweden, and I'll call him here from the northern upper Midwest. Actually, more Canadians live south of where I am than live north of where I am right now, because part of America sticks above, Ontario, where a lot of Canadians live. But you think about how further north Hudson's Bay is from where I am, it's like, ugh, that's really scary. But the current does change the weather and make it possible for people to be in places. And to make sure it's not a fluke, here we've got a story. Historic snow hits Japan. Record flurries cause shutdowns in Russia and China. Spain issues cold weather alerts, restarts old coal power plants to cope. This is from November 25th.
Yeah, the snow flurries in Beijing were a full-on blizzard with multiple feet of snow and also 10-foot snow drifts. And that was the second snowfall of the year. The first one was what you referenced. They had flurries come down. And not more than a week later, they had one of the biggest blizzards and the earliest ever recorded there. And that Japan snowfall was from record sea effect.
Wow.
Japan has something called sea effect snow, where that area in the Yellow Sea there stays a bit warmer.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because Japan,
really Arctic cold front, they dropped massive amounts of snow over Sapporo.
It's incredible.
And then last year, it happened the same, but it was in a different month. It was in January, and they got something like 4 feet of snow. Same, it was a record CFX snow, but in a different month, just a year later. So it came earlier this year than January of last year.